Proof of pain. In a lake in my hometown, when summer arrives, massive numbers of crabs cross the nearby roads, much like they do on Christmas Island. Many of them end up crushed under the wheels of passing cars. Every time I went there for a walk, I found myself treading upon countless carcasses, flattened as thin as rice crackers. Perhaps because it was such an unpleasant sight, looking at those pitiful crabs would often lead me to brood over the fleeting nature of life. In the summer of my 28th year, on the day my father died, I had come to the shores of this same lake. Having just quit my job, my mental state was extremely unstable. I was doing nothing of note, except filming videos purely for my own self-satisfaction. In the sweltering heat, under the cold glares of passers-by, I was a pale young man talking to a camera alone. What on earth am I doing? I asked myself once more. To the world, today was just an ordinary day. To the city where I lived, it was a day of record-breaking heat, the hottest ever observed in Japan. To me, it was supposed to be a day of mourning for the death of my closest kin. And to a crab, it might have been the day its life flickered out. What was the difference between the death of a crab and the death of my father? In truth, in terms of biological activity ceasing, there was little difference. Finding a distinction was merely an act of extreme nepotism, simply because I am human and shared his blood. Of course, they say lower organisms like crabs have no ego, no sense of pain, and no fear of death, so sympathizing with them is ultimately meaningless. Still, on that day, I did not go to see my father in his critical condition, nor was I there for his final moments. It all began when I came to harbor a pain that cannot be proven. I could see spider legs at the edge of my vision. I believe it was about 3 months after I started a part-time job delivering newspapers. I was a fool to choose a job that would destroy my internal clock, especially since I already suffered from a sleep disorder. Even as my senses of taste and smell vanished due to the cigarette smoke permeating the office, and even when I lunged at a colleague out of irritability from sleep deprivation, strangely, I felt no sense of crisis. I convinced myself it was all in my head and continued working for the sake of making a living. But one day, as I rested my head on my pillow to sleep, I felt an extremely unpleasant sensation, as if someone were stroking the back of my head. At the edge of my vision was a giant black insect. The body was invisible, but several hairy legs were twitching and wriggling. If I continued this way, I would surely break my body. In the summer of my 22nd year, I decided to quit the job after only 3 months. My workplace, the employment office, and my family all joined in a chorus of, "You're a piece of trash who can't hold down a job." But because I am unconventional, unlike them, I still don't think I was wrong. While struggling to find a new job, I began to feel a dull pain deep inside my face. I didn't think it was a serious illness at first. I simply suspected sinusitis, went to an ENT, and took the prescribed medication. Eventually, the pain intensified, making it difficult to move my jaw and tongue. I became unable to speak normally or even correctly pronounce my mother tongue, Japanese.
Nihon became Nihon, and arimasu became aremasu.
When I mumbled in a low voice, I was scolded to speak clearly. After moving back to my parents' house at 23 and visiting several local dentists, I was finally diagnosed with temporomandibular joint disorder, TMJ. Even then, I believed that if I wore a mouthpiece every night before bed and took the painkiller diclofenac when it got bad, I would be cured. I can only say I was an irredeemable fool. This was merely the beginning of a long hell. Initially, I hoped that if I explained my condition, the people around me would understand. But who would be convinced by someone saying, "My jaw hurts so much that I can't do anything"? Considering the pain in my jaw, I decided to enroll in a vocational school that I could graduate from in 2 years. However, during that time, my condition worsened. By my 2nd year, even a normal social life became difficult. Due to the intense pain, I could barely hold a conversation. I carried a whiteboard to communicate through writing. Instead of the ineffective painkillers, I drank nothing but sugary drinks to distract myself, which resulted in frequent stomach issues. Between the side effects of the medication, my skin and digestive system were in tatters. I was at my limit. Driven to desperation, I clung to any hope and visited one hospital after another. I went to oral surgeons for CT scans and neurosurgeons for MRIs, but they found no abnormalities. My jaw hurts incredibly much and I'm in trouble. "I'll undergo surgery or anything else, just please stop the pain," I pleaded with the doctor. He simply replied nonchalantly, But your jaw joint isn't extremely displaced, so surgery wouldn't mean anything. Then what is this pain? Please do something, at least give me some proof that the pain exists. I'm sorry, but that's difficult. I wanted to scream. I felt a tremendous, piercing agony as if electrodes were being pressed against both my cheeks. The pain was certainly there, yet there was no way to objectively prove it. I was at a loss, truly not knowing what to do anymore. So, what do you plan to do after graduation? This was during a career counseling session with a teacher at the vocational school. Well, I actually want a job where I can use my language skills, but with my chronic TMJ I think it might be difficult. Pfft. The teacher suddenly burst out laughing in the middle of my sentence. I honestly couldn't believe my ears. Perhaps it was absurd to consider language-related employment while suffering from TMJ. But there was no reason to laugh. I'm sorry, it's just so funny, the teacher said, covering their face with their hand, seemingly without malice but genuinely amused. I was so stunned that my anger turned into bewilderment and I said nothing more. At the very least I had to make my parents understand. Because the pain made it difficult to speak, I wrote a letter to them. But even after reading it, my father mocked my inability to attend classes normally and my use of a whiteboard as a performance. But it really hurts. Stop being so spoiled. My father cut off my desperate plea, slamming the table as if to intimidate me. At that moment I fell silent like a frog stared down by a snake. During my father's lifetime I was almost never able to face him and speak directly. Since I was a child, if I didn't listen he would flip the table during dinner. If I made a mistake he would hurl verbal abuse that denied my very humanity. Perhaps because of this, an instinctive fear had become ingrained in me. After somehow graduating from vocational school at 25, I was forced back into a university, only to drop out for a second time. Here too my parents showed no concern for my condition. Instead they only blamed me, saying I lacked perseverance, that I abandoned everything halfway, and that their money had gone to waste. If I forgot to wash the dishes they were smashed. If I didn't open the door because I was asleep in my room when my father returned, he would spray water through the window with a hose. Even when I told my mother or friends, they would either dismiss it saying it's your fault, or laugh it off. Eventually I began to think that because I was a hopeless person, I deserved to be treated this way. I had no allies. Late one night I woke the family by screaming in my room. What happened? My startled parents opened the door and entered, but I didn't feel like explaining. I was having nightmares almost every night back then. I didn't even know how many times this had happened. My life at 26 was over 90% dominated by jaw pain. Because of the endless agony, my concentration was near zero. I could no longer enjoy reading books, watching movies or anime, or playing games. Having cut ties with my friends, I had no one to talk to. Between the pain and the lack of sleep, I had no energy for anything. All I could do was wander around the neighborhood during the day or lie in bed staring blankly. Looking at the cherry blossoms in the park I often passed, I seriously contemplated hanging myself from one of the trees. I will quote the suicide note I wrote at the time exactly as it was. Suicide note. I'm going to die because my TMJ is too painful. Dying because of jaw pain might sound ridiculous, but for the past 4 years, there have been many things I couldn't do freely because of it. I'm tired. November 4th, 2018. P.S. Please throw this away after reading. Even if I write in my suicide note that I suffered from an intractable disease, no one will take it seriously anyway. Even after I die, I will forever be labeled a lazy person who refused to work, treated as a madman who suddenly and for no reason developed a mental abnormality in a problem-free household. That is fine with me. That is the kind of life I have truly desired. Since I am dying, please do not insult me any further. 10 years have passed since then, and before I knew it I was 33. A resentment remains deep in my heart, settled like sediment. Am I not even allowed to feel pain unless it can be objectively proven? After my father's death, I withdrew from society and stayed shut in my house for a while. As the years went by, the pain gradually began to recede. Now I believe I am in a state of remission. It's difficult to explain in one word what cured it, but several factors were key. Certainly there were physical causes. In addition to simple poor posture, overusing my smartphone and computer was one factor. Sitting all day is bad for the body, so I started going outside and walking for long periods or doing 10 minutes of strength training every day while watching videos. After about 6 months, I gained some muscle and the moderate exercise had a certain effect. The pain was somewhat alleviated. However, if I consider it purely a physical issue, the degree of pain seems disproportionate. I must mention the other cause, my mental illness. This might stray a bit from the main point, but I want to talk about the idea that pain does not exist. Recently, I happened to pick up a medical book on chronic pain at the library. As soon as I opened it, I saw a description of a man that made my eyes widen. This is me, I thought. I cannot quote the text directly for copyright reasons, but the book explains scientifically what pain is and why it exists. We intuitively think that pain occurs through neural reflexes and is proportional to the degree of damage, but according to the author, this common sense is wrong. Essentially, pain is like an alarm the brain sounds when it perceives danger. It does not necessarily correspond to actual physical damage. The case study introduced as evidence was shocking. A man at a construction site stepped on a nail that pierced through his boot. Complaining of agonizing pain, he was rushed to the hospital. He was even prescribed fentanyl, which has a sedative effect 100 times stronger than morphine. However, it turned out the nail had simply passed between his toes. There was no physical injury. Yet he felt the pain. In other words, pain has a strong psychological component. I myself suffered from terrible jaw pain for a long time, becoming unable to live a normal life, being labeled a sluggard and even contemplating suicide. But what if we consider that pain does not exist? There might have been physical damage in the beginning. But what if after that, the brain's alarm malfunctioned and continued to create a non-existent pain? This was likely the major cause of my pain. Indeed, after taking SSRIs, antidepressants, for about a year the jaw pain clearly began to improve. Many people suffer from chronic pain, TMJ, back pain, fibromyalgia and more. To dismiss pain simply because a functional diagnosis finds nothing is, in fact, nonsense. This is because pain is a subjective reality, not something that exists objectively. Some time ago, a tumor was found in the tongue of one of my siblings. It wasn't cancer, but it was the size of a ping-pong ball. Since it would obstruct the airway if it grew any larger, it was removed through major surgery under general anesthesia. The postoperative progress was fair, but A complained of mysterious high fevers and lethargy. Having just joined a new company, A's boss was cold toward the frequent absences. "Isn't it just that you lack motivation?" A recounted this with visible anger, saying, "I felt like showing him the stitches in my tongue." Yet even A was completely indifferent to my TMJ. No matter how many times I explained my condition, I received little understanding. At 27, I suffered from severe sleep disorders and chronic pain, and on top of that I developed some kind of mental illness, likely bipolar disorder. I fled my family home, which had turned into a living hell where my terminally ill father was abusing my grandparents who had dementia. After a period of being homeless, I eventually found a job for the sake of survival. However, because of my illness, my concentration was almost non-existent. I couldn't read, let alone do my job. I couldn't even remember people's names and kept making simple mistakes. My boss and colleagues were fed up with me, taunting me at every turn with comments like, "Do you have no motivation?" or, "This guy is useless." Eventually, as I was leaving the company, a colleague in his 60s said this: "You don't know true suffering." Apparently, at the company where he worked before retirement, there was a boss he hated so much he wanted to kill him. Perhaps he wanted to say that my troubles were nothing compared to his, or perhaps he said it because he wanted me to be strong. His true intention remains unclear. Looking back now, it seems my family couldn't even understand why my condition was a problem, no matter how many times I explained it. And even now, past 30, I still don't understand the true suffering my colleagues spoke of. I didn't even try to think about the fact that A had undergone life-threatening surgery, or the pain of my father, who died vomiting blood and screaming in agony that even morphine couldn't stop. I have finally reached this extremely simple conclusion: humans cannot know the pain of others. We get angry only when we are hurt, yet we don't even try to know the pain of others ourselves. How selfish I was. Realizing that I had spent half my life on the impossible, I was overcome by a profound sense of emptiness. Was this decade literally filled with pain truly just a waste? So what can I do now? I'll end the misery contest here. Now it's my turn to be tested. How much interest can you take in the pain of others? In the spring of my 33rd year, I received a message from a foreign woman I didn't know on social media. At first I thought it was just typical spam, but it seemed otherwise. I learned about you in the comments section of a video. I have similar symptoms. Following her lead, I searched and found a video I had commented on years ago when I was at my wit's end with jaw pain. It was a recording of a patient's case. In that man's case, the uvula in the back of his throat would twitch uncontrollably regardless of his will. I've had symptoms like his for years and I don't know why. I believe that's what I wrote back then. Eventually she found that comment and sent me a message now. Symptoms like these are rare, aren't they? So I thought if I talked to you I might find some kind of treatment. She told me she had been feeling a strange sensation in the back of her throat for about a year, and this unexplained twitching of the uvula was interfering with her daily life. Later, when we had a video call, we showed each other the backs of our throats. I could see the involuntary movement of her uvula, twitching irregularly like an arrhythmia. At that moment I asked her directly, I hope you don't mind me asking, but did anything happen in your life that had a major impact on you? I lost my father 5 years ago and I think that probably affected my symptoms. In fact, after my father's death, my symptoms had gradually improved. Then by chance. Actually, I lost my father too. She began to open up, speaking candidly about her condition. I've been to various hospitals, but in the end no treatment was found. I suspected a mental illness and have been taking psychotropic drugs, but they haven't had much effect. Lately, the nausea won't stop, I can't sleep well at night, and now I just pray to God every day that this pain will stop. The night I first chatted with her, I cried quietly in the shower. Someone in this world has a similar past and, coincidentally, the same kind of symptoms. That fact alone made me feel terribly pained. The 8 years of my own suffering and humiliation rushed back to me, linking with the situation she was in. I felt a strong resolve. As someone in a similar position, I had to do something. Having finally seen an improvement in my own symptoms, I told her everything I could. I told her that taking antidepressants had indirectly improved my pain, and that I tried to get moderate exercise. I even made a video about her symptoms on my channel to broadcast it to the world. The fact that there are 2 people in this world suffering from the same pain means it's not just in our heads. Until now, I had always suffered because those around me didn't understand my pain. Even when I cried out for help, I was mocked or ignored. I resented the world, feeling my feelings had been trampled. Looking back calmly, I sometimes wonder if I simply dragged her into a revenge fueled by extreme personal bitterness. But in any case, now it is my turn to be tested on the depth of my concern for others, and by extension my compassion for this world.